Jon Sopel joins me of the news agents. And Jon, I'd like to talk to you, if I can, more about this Minneapolis shooting. I spoke about it in the first hour, and there was almost universal, more than disapproval, anger at what has happened. Might Trump and his colleagues be able to just bat this away, or is it looking unlikely?
I think they'll bat it away. I think that there is half of America who thinks that she was a domestic terrorist. They've bought every line that Donald Trump has said, and that Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, has said, that there is no ambiguity about it at all. This was someone radicalised. This was someone whose heart was filled with hatred towards, immigrations and enforcement and the ICE officials, and it's a done deal. And there is half of America who thinks there's absolutely no doubt about it. This was a cold-blooded killing of an innocent woman who was exercising her right to protest. And everyone has gone to the barricades in both directions, and no one is listening to it at all. Obviously, if you look at that video and watch it very closely, which I've done now a number of times.
Me too, yeah.
The angle at which the bullet goes into the car through that windscreen means that the gun was fired from the side, not in front of the car, at the side of the car. So it's hard then to insist that this was someone who shot in fear of his life, because the car had already passed him.
And he was physically clear of it. You could see the space between it. He was near to it, make no mistake. And the other guy who'd been pulling at the handle was obviously close to it. He'd stopped pulling it at that point, but window wide open. But he was clear of the vehicle. There was no danger to him from that vehicle.
No, and if you look at the statement that was put out by ICE, the federal agency responsible for immigration, they said that a number of officers were injured, but will make a full recovery. No officers were injured. There were no officers.
No. The man who shot her walked slowly away. To say call 911.
Exactly. So there was no one injured. So the story unravels fast as soon as you touch it. Look, it's possible that the guy who fired the shots did feel that the car started coming towards him, and maybe he reacted instinctively. And instinctively in America means shoot first, ask questions later. And, the sad fact of the matter is that there have been so many shootings like this of people in cars, and then the law enforcement officials say, well, I felt my life was threatened and therefore it was self-defense, and so it goes on. But, this will play into radical elements on Trump's base who want to hear that the fight is being taken to immigrant communities, and that this was the woke mob, the Antifa, that they are domestic terrorists, and it just seems impossible to protest reasonably now.
And I always think about what it must be like as well from the point of view of the agents. There'll be a mixed bunch of people, I'm sure. But I saw on Instagram a couple of hours after this story broke, a youngish, like 30s, not a kid, a black guy in his car, in a car park, using his phone, stopped by 4 or 5 ICE agents. They pulled his door open. He was visible and half out of his car. And they said, show us your identity. And he said, I'm under no compunction to show you my identity. If you get me a law enforcement officer, a policeman, I will. But no, I'm an American citizen. They said, prove to us you're an American citizen. And he said, why do I have to prove to you I'm an American citizen? And they said, well, your accent doesn't sound right. That's what one of the ICE agents said to him. Your accent doesn't sound right.
So you are now in a position, and it's so kind of dark in some ways, that you can be arrested on suspicion of being brown or being black. And if you are Latino and you are in an area where there may be illegal immigrants, then you can be arrested just on the basis that we don't know who you are, and therefore you're coming to us to a detention centre until such times as you can prove that you otherwise. And so presumption of guilt until you can prove yourself innocent seems to be the modus operandi of some of these agents. And I think that, if you are Latino or if you're from a Somali background, which is, the population of Minneapolis has the biggest Somali community in America, and there's a big concentration of Somalis who've come from Somalia, who are there. And it must be terrifying, because you may have had a passport, you may have had, a US passport, born in America, but you haven't got it with you, and you're arrested just on the suspicion that your accent sounds a bit funny, or whatever it happens to be. And so, look, Donald Trump, kudos to him, genuinely kudos to him, over the success he's had at the southern border, at which he is, managed to stop illegal immigration to a trickle. He has also said that I am going to crack down on the illegal immigrants who are running the drug cartels and the gangs and are involved in criminality. Again.
And nobody would argue against that.
Nobody would argue against that. But because it's good theatre and it peps up his base, it's also being used...
And angers the others.
It's almost being used for theatre for theatre's sake.
Reality TV.
Reality TV. It's another episode in the Trump show. We've seen it play out internationally over the past few days. Now we're seeing it play out domestically. And I think that it shows the level of polarisation that there is in America, how a federal agency is now reviled by a big section of the population and loved by another section of the population. I hope it's a cautionary tale to Britain, frankly, that, whatever doubts we have at times over policing or whatever, that broadly speaking, policing in this country is done with consent, whereas policing in America is done at the barrel of a gun with the threat of force.
Yeah. And the sense I get as well about the situation that you and I have been speaking earlier this week about Venezuela and about Greenland, and that sort of essential declaration of war, metaphorically speaking, on both of those countries. This is a bit of a declaration of war on his own country, and has been for some time, hasn't it, when it comes to the ICE agents and the raids? Because not all of those agents are marked, for example. Some of them don't have a number, don't have identification. That means anyone could dress like one of them and go out and cause mayhem on the streets.
Yes, it does look at times as though it is Donald Trump's private army. Now, Donald Trump has had some rebuffs in that the Supreme Court overturned his right to have the National Guard providing additional policing in certain states. So at the moment, but ICE agents can operate wherever they are sent, and they are operating in areas which have got large Democratic Party control in rural, in urban areas, and they are going to carry on doing this because I think they see the cold numbers of statistics on polling data and think this is working for us.
What's impressed me is, and I'm a realist, I know that when there are big protests, there will be a whole mixed bag of people amongst those protesters. But what's impressed me is the number of just ordinary citizens who are teachers or neighbours or own a cafe. Saw an example of it just today. A woman who either owns or runs a cafe refusing to let ICE agents into the cafe. It was in New York, and she was just saying, nope, you're not coming in. Nobody gets to be terrorised in my cafe for having a coffee because you don't like the look of them. Get lost. She didn't use that language, but and they did get lost for however long, I don't know. But I think there's a bit of hope in that, and a bit of, there's certainly bravery in it because these people are armed to the teeth. But there's a bit of hope in that, I think.
There are bits of it that are hope, but it will be weaponised. It will be, used to...
She's a crazy lefty, Antifa.
She's a crazy lefty, Antifa, and, and they will identify who the woman is, and she'll be doxed on social media, and so it will go on. You don't do that without paying a price. And, of course, if you were in Britain, in a normal democratic country, the leaders would be hoping that there will be peace and that everyone will remain calm. And you can see in America how it quite serves people's purposes if there is a violent reaction. And, if you... this killing yesterday, or murder, depending on how you want to call it, took place less than a mile away from where
George Floyd.
Life was squeezed out of George Floyd in that hideous moment.
Absolutely.
With that, Minneapolis policeman sort of with his knee on his neck. And in the immediate aftermath of that, which was when I was, based in the US, there was a huge amount of sympathy for Floyd. This was grotesque. But then the protests grew, then it became Black Lives Matter, then it was defund the police. And of course, then the Trump bandwagon starts moving in the opposite direction and say, these are the enemy within. These are the people we need to crack down on. They want to defund the police. And so it only takes a few people on the extreme left to change the narrative completely. And you can see why Donald Trump might hope that we don't want too much time spent examining, how the bullets went into that car and killed a 37-year-old mother of 3. You want to focus on the Antifa. And so protests actually help him. And that is the kind of dystopian world we're in, where he kind of, the more there is a reaction, the more that the MAGA movement can say, look at these dreadful people.
Which is why Tim Walz, the governor, is saying, stay calm, feel free to protest, exercise your right, but keep it peaceful, which so far people have.